Shannon Crow. Thank you so much for joining me on what's now called the Week's Well. It may have been practicing well a few weeks ago. We just changed it.
I am so excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me to be here to chat with you and your audience.
I'm so glad to have met you and to have made your connection because, of course, I've followed your work for a while. And I think it's so cool that you began podcasting before a lot of other people were thinking about it. And I also love that that was part of your effort to connect yoga teachers who are a global population and who come from so many different lineages, as we discussed when I visited you, and styles. So I thought maybe we could start with how you got into yoga. I understand that you did a Kundalini training first, but that's also how you became a trainer. And I guess I'm interested in your ascension, if that's the word, to becoming a teacher and what your path has looked like to get to here. Because I think now you're multidisciplinary. You've got this pelvic floor expertise and niching, which I'm interested in also getting into. So you've taken a lot of turns from where you started to get to here now. So tell
Yeah,
me about that.
I think like one of the first yoga classes I did was a girls' night out. And it was like we were going to go to yoga. We all had young kids and we were doing like whatever we could do to get out of the house once in a while and do like a night class, a bow making night class or something. How to make a pretty bow on your gift. Okay, now let's go to yoga. And it was the yoga one where, I mean, my friends were all giggling, and I really think we went out to the bar after. So didn't really feel like this is the yoga start of things. But that was the one where I felt like, oh, wow, I just dropped into my own body, my own space. And as a mom of young kids, that didn't happen a lot. Like I often put my kids first and everyone else first. And I was just busy trying to run a house um, and do lots of things and not really connect with myself. So, my friends are like on to other things, and I decided to stick with yoga. Then I went to a yoga class with Susie. Oh my gosh, Susie was an amazing teacher. It was at her house, and she let me take baby number 2 when he was still in a car seat. She's like, just come anyway. And she would like teach the class and watch him. And it was a group class. I was like, oh, this is the best. Like that I don't have to find a sitter. I can still have this like drop in, find myself. And then she said she was heading to Toronto. There was a Kundalini yoga teacher training. It was going to be over a year. I thought that would be cool. I really had no idea what that was going to entail. And then, yeah, fast forward, I've just like have seen the difference that yoga makes in my life. Like I am able to be more present and be a better mom and person and human, and when I make a little more space for myself. And there's been a lot of bumpy learning along the way. Like I used to think yoga was I roll out my mat and stretch and sweat
Mm-hmm.
or meditate, or like it just had a different feel to it than it does now.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about that presence, that being present, because you've been practicing a long time and you've been teaching quite some time, almost 20 years at this point, like 17 years or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And that's decades, plural. It's funny, sad to say, but it's
Are
true.
you trying to make me feel old, Kim?
I know.
I'm just kidding.
I'm telling you, I'm having some serious conversations with myself about, like, the other day I presented basically in front of a relatively large group of people. It was a little bit hot seat type. And I walked out of there and I thought, holy smokes, like when you are in your late 40s, early 50s as a person and potentially as a woman, I don't know because I only know what it's like to be in my body. You got to double down on like being self-confident and not letting the actual sinking ship and the gravity that's pulling you down toward the earth, like pull your mind there. You've got to sort of rebound up. and reconnect with your confidence. But anyway, I am interested in the presence that you said, like, in other words, walk us through a little bit that going into your body and how that is what gives you that ability to be present, a better mother, better partner, better whoever on the planet.
That's a really good question. I don't know how it actually works. I mean, on a really small level, how often are you invited in a day to like roll around on the floor maybe a bit, notice just physically how your body's feeling, and then notice the thoughts that come up? Like, I think I was raised by a lot of doers. So it was like your worth was measured in, if you made a pie or you got your closet organized or you got a job or you did well on a test. It was a lot of doing, was, how good are you? And then it certainly wasn't right away that I thought, oh, wow, this dropping into like more being and more like, who am I? You're making me think here of like, when did I kind of lose that? Because the other thing is, I know when I was younger, I would be out in the forest. I was really lucky to have like a 50-acre maple forest to grow up in and just be like, exploring, looking for bugs, doing whatever, and probably just being. And then at some point, it was like, no, you have to do.
Right.
And then becoming a parent was really like, I just wanted to do it perfect. Okay, so you're responsible for a human life. And if you don't do this right, like, there was so much pressure as a new mom. And so that class made me feel more like myself. Like, anyone who's ever raised a tiny human, like feeding them, having them attached to you, like,
Yeah.
you're just so concerned with what's going on with them. So
Right.
I don't know if that helps answer your question. I'm not
It
really sure.
does.
Okay.
It really does. And I think everybody's, answer is individual. And I also think that noticing that you're talking about, that proprioceptive, interoceptive, I think that's like something in the last, especially since COVID, I've gotten super interested in kind of dialing into, that you become more aware by virtue of, okay, so let's back up a step. It seems to me like the pause, right? Like, isn't there's like some publication called The Pause? I don't know. Like, everybody talks about everybody in wellness talks about the pause, but the pause becomes multiple pauses, right? It becomes like pausing as a gerund. And as you engage in a practice of pausing, then you become, I think, more like heightened in awareness of the space around you. If you ever had teachers who've said, like, notice the temperature of the room around you. If you're in an IRL class, like, notice, how many people might be surrounding you, notice the temp, all those things, like, you just notice those things. And then you go inside and you're like, oh, I'm not actually exhaling fully today. Or, like, I always catch myself, like in mid exhale, I stop and like gasp again because I have anxiety. And that's what it is. It's right there, the mechanism of anxiety. And so it seems like you have this opportunity to notice all those things. And so that's, anyway, I thought your answer was great. And it helped me think about the noticing to pull that out. And I guess the more you noticed, was it the more you wanted to know? Is that what it was? Was it like a point counterpoint? Like, the rest of my life is feeling like I've got this performative thing going on. I want to be like a number one mom. I want to, whatever it is. And then this yoga feels like the equal and opposite, or in the beginning? I mean, clearly it seems like it's infused now into your life, but in the beginning, did it just feel like a refuge? Probably still does, but
Maybe. I mean, there was a lot. I also realize now, I was having a conversation with a friend and I realize now that, like, I feel like I probably grew up with quite a bit of chaos in my household as a child. And so then maybe got into the habit of like, that's what's going to be. And then it was going to those classes, like it was just an idea that someone had and to go. I'm not going to say it was just easy right away. Like sitting in meditation for someone who's used to like do, have to like do more things,
Mm-hmm.
or Shavasana at the end to just lay there wasn't easy for me at all and really uncomfortable. But in those moments, then I was like, oh, wow, just wow, that's how I like connect more with myself. It's hard to articulate it. It's like
Mm-hmm.
such a feeling.
It's so deep. Yeah.
It
It's a
is.
depth practice. I mean, it's kind of like describing your favorite poem or writing a good piece of poetry. I mean, I think that's the reason why it's hard to do that because it's
Yeah.
hard to put these deep experiences into actual words, which are, which fail so much of the time anyway.
Yes. And also, um, like many yoga teachers, I think I was also at a place in my life where I'm like, I feel like there's something else. Like, I feel like this is uncomfortable what I'm in. And now I'm like looking for, I think that's probably why I signed up for yoga teacher training.
Mm,
And I have to say, like, my first weekend of going down to this training in Toronto, uh, the whole weekend was about chanting a mantra. And I was pretty used to doing mantra in the small house class with Susie. But to go in and it was like a whole weekend of learning mantra, I was a bit thrown off again. And I don't mind that. Like, I like
mhm,
having, like, ooh, this is weird. I'm going to
mhm.
try it. And wow, I actually, like, it felt really uplifting to be sounding with other humans in a room.
Yeah, totally. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. I mean, and that's like the sum. What is it? The sum is greater. The total is greater than the sum of the parts. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So it's like if you're all there together, making those sounds together. I mean, I have a mentor who talks about his bhakti yoga practice and how he spends just a few minutes a day pouring all of his feelings, his jealousies, his grief, his frustration, his anger, I mean, just all of his ego, like all the emotions that he has into a mantra practice. And he devotes those feelings into like smoothing them out or kind of like channeling them into these simple sounds that he just repeats over and over again. And he says it's like better than any psychotherapy. He's married to a psychotherapist and they're, kind of evolving. He's a yogi himself. So he just obviously talks about how that is in a way so much more healing than anything you could put words to, talk about your fear, talk about your anger, talk about your
Yeah.
whatever. So I mean, mantra is awesome. And it makes me think of, because of course, especially let's say Iyengar yoga practitioners on the call, or even other practitioners. I mean, I kind of get these emails in and people say I came from this place to that place and love the interdisciplinary conversation, la, la, la. So I don't know how exposed some of the people on the call are to like mantras, especially the Kundalini way, because they like lead with that. I mean, it's one of the things I respect so much about the Kundalini practice. It makes me think about what you've done with your business, which is to help yoga teachers define their niche and to market it. And I'm not saying mantra is a niche, but maybe you would call it that. I'm just wondering about the bridge between this depth practice that you were really pursuing and experiencing and growing from, and how you landed into the connected teacher, because you've got a big community, like 12,000 on your Facebook, page or group rather. And, you've been interviewing tons of people for now 300 something, 27, 8, 9 episodes. I saw that just the other day. That's a lot. So let's talk about how you got to connecting teachers into helping them niche and market themselves?
These are good questions. They're making me really think. So I feel like one big part of this is that every time I left a yoga teacher training, I would be feeling a bit like I was out all alone again. So it was even in those weekends. So we'd go down, do the weekend. I felt connected to the people there. I felt really connected to myself because I was doing the practice. And then boom, I'd be back in the real world that felt really different from that weekend. Now, one powerful thing that in that 200-hour, my teacher, Sataram is her name, she would encourage us to do like a 40-day sadhana practice, like to continue to do this and then notice what this meditation would do or what this kriya would do, this practice. And so that kind of held me between the weekends. But when I left that 200-hour yoga teacher training, I remember thinking, well, we'll just have to get together every month, like with this group of people. And of course, we never did plan that. And then this happened over and over again. So then I would sign up for another yoga teacher training and be like, okay, I'm back in it. And then I would leave. So it got to the point where it was like, do I keep spending money? And then there was also the point where I joined a yoga school that really, there was some pretty messed up culty power dynamics going on in it. And when I left that yoga school, I feel like that's what really motivated me to start the Facebook group, which led to the podcast. Kind of, it was all one idea. And it was that, like, how quickly things could turn to be like the whole cult dynamic of like, you're out of the community now can be very present in the yoga world. And I didn't want other yoga teachers to feel like that. And I also saw like competitiveness really rise up in different communities of yoga teachers and thought, this isn't helping anyone. And that's where the niching came in, because the moment you say, I'm a yoga teacher who specializes in mantra or pelvic health or whatever it is, it just wipes out the competition. You know, you like, if you don't teach children's yoga, you're going to send children to the children's yoga in your area. So it makes it more of a collaboration for yoga teachers. So I think it's from like bumping up against some pretty hard things and then hearing from other yoga teachers who were in the same boat and just thinking, how can I show up and help and connect yoga teachers to information, each other, and like ideas. And that's where the podcast came from. And then the Facebook group.
That's so cool. It's such a great idea. And of course I've been, and may again be actively involved in like the branding and strategic marketing world. It's what I wound up specializing myself in professionally before I became a full-time yoga teacher 20 years ago. So I had some time some time to think about organizations, companies that have a name that expresses itself through a vision and a mission, and also is sort of boundaried by and anchored by, values that the organization is like all about. And it's not easy to create all of that and to be doing what it is that you say you want to do. Like the Connected Yoga Teacher is such a clear name and it's such a clear brand. And listening to you describe how you got there and the issues that you were trying to address also sounds really clear. So it's just a really neat idea, especially, I've been teaching for 20 years and I've always struggled to feel like, aside from the studio that I created, which was a 14-year kind of interdisciplinary, like multidisciplinary, energetically driven. We did like chakra trainings and all kinds of different stuff. And I think I told you this off recording when we first met, that when I ran my teacher training programs, I only hired people that I disagreed with. So if they came in and they're like, I'd love to train with you or whatever, we'd sit down and talk and I'd say, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And as soon as we had a debate, I was like, we're on, because I want the students to hear and learn from different approaches and opinions so that they can be more empowered on their path and decide what really resonates most with them. And yet, when I would practice places, especially, I'll be really honest, in the Iyengar yoga community, I always felt like I didn't belong. I just always felt like I didn't really feel totally included. It was almost like the cult thing, like, unless you're only ever talking about that thing, the only thing you're like showing up and representing yourself as is like in the context of that particular practice. I just always felt like, isn't there more to us to share? Isn't there more? Aren't we other than that? And can we know each other that way? And I think, why do you think that is? And so I apologize. I told you about Tangent Airlines. I think it flew around during our conversation as well, but we're in the skies. Tangent Airlines. I apologize. but I wanted to ask the two questions about the cult aspect and the competition aspect. Let's do the two C's. What do you think about this modern practice of yoga, or any practice of yoga, or is it any practice of anything that begets cult nature, cult status? Why do we go there, do you
That's a
think?
good question. I've listened to a lot of cult podcasts, which
I love them.
feel kind of healing, kind of validating in different ways. There's
Mm,
a real comfort that I have with whether it's yoga or like I played hockey or, you just have this community and you do this thing. I don't know.
mm,
I belong to a group of hikers. You could say that could become cult like. There's a real comfort with like we're all doing this. We all, there's some rituals to it. Weddings is another great example. Like if you go to a wedding in a different country, you might be like, what is happening? That that is really nice. You go to a yoga studio and you know that this music's going to play when you go in, and there'll be this
mm,
scent in the room, and the teacher's going to say or do this each class. Like that's really cool. The part where it starts to fall off, like where that's really cool, is when there's that power dynamic. I think it
mm,
is. And when you said like you invite that being questioned, um, when you see that that's not welcome in a yoga space, like
mhm,
when someone gets really defensive or uncomfortable with being questioned,
mm,
um, that's pretty unhealthy. And then also, I remember when I said like I went to that first yoga class, I remember putting that teacher up on a pedestal, like thinking like she must be so like calm all the time, and like what's her real life like? Like I wanted to put her like in charge of telling me how to live my life. So it's not just like some power hungry person who decides, "Oh yeah, I'm going to like learn some yoga and run a cult."
right.
It's
check those two boxes. Teach yoga, run a cult. Check. Yeah, that's so true.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
So I
Yeah,
think that power can go to someone's head pretty quickly. And then,
yeah.
so you have a
It can
whole
go to
room of
both
people.
heads, right? It can go to
Yes.
the head of the teacher and to the head of the
Yes.
student, to your
And I've
point.
been there. I've been like, okay, okay. Like literally, I just learned this week that the whole saying of like drink the Kool-Aid is actually from a cult where people were to drink a poisonous drink.
Yeah,
So,
that's how they died. They killed
yes.
themselves by drinking the Kool-Aid. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's really nuanced stuff. So if anyone's listening and they're like, who would ever get into a yoga cult? I'm not saying I was in a yoga cult where they were like, drink this poisonous drink. Uh, but there was really subtle, messed up stuff going on that I did not recognize, and am just coming to terms with like 8 years leaving.
Mm,
So
mm.
I I think that I think it's hard to see when you're in it, and
Oh,
anyone can get in that situation. So anyone who's ever like, talks about people who are in an abusive relationship or an abusive cult
totally.
dynamic, it can happen to anyone because my friends and family know I'm like very strong-willed and very strong-minded, and I don't,
Mhm.
and it, it can happen to anyone. So
Yeah. It makes me think of, one second. It makes me think of this. It's so strange I'm sharing this, but I think this will resonate, or I hope it does, with everybody, with you, but also with the listeners. But I have twice now in the last couple of weeks, well, been out to dinner with like a new couple because I decided after, we moved here to Denver, Colorado during COVID, and I spend most of my time doing things like this. So you and I cannot go to coffee this afternoon, unfortunately, even though I would love to. And so I log off and I go kind of stare at the empty walls of my house, and they've been closing in a little bit because the work I've been doing has not been out in the world in my zip code or near it or whatever. And I had no idea how isolating and how like depressed. I mean, just an extended COVID. It's been awful. And so I went into V2 after about a year. I was like, all right, I'm just going to go out and just basically ask everyone I meet to come to my house or to meet me somewhere. Like, I don't care if they say no. I don't, just anybody. I'm like, hey, I'm having a party on me. Like, would you, so I'm reaping those benefits now because you put yourself that far out there, like just the law of averages, people are going to say yes. So I've had, a couple of dinners in two cases where one person is just straight up an alcoholic. And I didn't know that going in. And I am absolutely positive because I've grown up with it. I can spot someone like that a mile away. Every single person in a bar, I can, dang, that person, that for whatever. Because I have such a lived experience in my cells over feeling what, that tension in that addict's life when they're making the decision to keep drinking, drinking, drinking. And so I've been watching the couple, the other person, the not alcoholic. And it's so interesting watching the pattern because in all cases, every person in it, and especially the person not addicted, the not alcoholic, is a super empowered person. In one case, it's a man. In one case, it's a woman. But the pattern is exactly the same, where they're in this relationship and you can see just behind the veil of their eyes, the worry, the stress, the concern, the sort of like being in it and just not I don't know what it is. I mean, there's lots of things I'm projecting, potentially panic or just the delusion that there isn't a problem. And my husband and I drove home last night and I didn't say anything. I was just really ruminating over how hard it is when you get caught in this pattern that you don't know how to get out of. And that's both of those people, right? The addict and the, codependent. So long way of saying it can happen to anybody,
yeah, I can. I can. Yeah, we're very complex beings. There's a lot of
Yeah.
elements to it. Yeah.
Well, and then, back to the yoga conversation, I mean, at least I was telling somebody, my therapist actually, like 2 weeks ago, like nothing has ever made me feel as good as yoga. Nothing. I
Same.
mean, parenting and, all those things are unbelievable, but there's so much storm and drang, and it's not really, I guess, comparable because it's like what's happening inside of me and what I experience every time, even if there's difficulty, even if my mind is whatever, but every time it just nothing has ever made me feel better. So let's maybe take that little piece and turn it into, or thread it into, my question about the competition and how you've addressed that, because this is one of the things that has like needled at me my entire career. When I opened my yoga studio, it did not even occur to me to open a nonprofit. I was like, of course it's a .com. Of course it's a for-profit. Of course I want to profit by doing this. But when you are attempting to profit doing something, you are necessarily competing with others doing the same thing. So it seems like you're helping teachers niche down is the way that you got around that? Or tell me a little bit about what you were observing in the competition and how your work addresses that, heals that, like places yoga in business, but in a conscious way, I would guess. It sounds like.
So over the years, I managed 2 yoga studios as well in that journey.
Mm,
One of them was more so like, enter the students in, work more as an office admin. And the other one was a full on, you run the space. Someone else is going to pay the bills, which is a pretty sweet spot to learn about a yoga studio.
yes, it is.
Uh, and in that one, all of the questions come up. So I know what it's like to be a yoga teacher I was a single mom of 3 kids when I was managing that studio. I know what it's like to need other teaching jobs outside of that studio to run workshops, do all the things to make the ends meet and pay your bills. And so the idea of these non-compete clauses and all of these things, we encouraged our teachers, go teach wherever. You have something else going on, we'll hang the poster up. I think that was part of it, is understanding what's going on, because I hear a lot of that with studios for sure. But also we made our studio all about community. So we did potlucks with teachers. We got together. We did round robins where any yoga teacher from the community could come in and teach. And it was like, we just drew numbers and taught and raised money. And that went to um, helping out people who couldn't afford to go to yoga, like all kinds of community building. And the more we did that, the stronger that studio was, basically. And I feel like we learned the hard way too. And as a yoga teacher, I remember what it felt like when I was like, I'm going to do all the things. I'm going to teach yoga dance, children's yoga, prenatal yoga, restorative, hot flow, you name it. I was teaching all kinds of variations of yoga just because I felt like, I need to make enough money. And then I realized the more I took away off my calendar and said, you know what, some other teacher who really loves this can do this, and I'm going to follow this one thing. I pared down my schedule. I made it more livable. I did burn out completely. That taught me that. And then seeing the difference of okay, because for a while I specialized in prenatal yoga and baby and me yoga, and I love that. And pelvic health is very connected to that. So it all sort of led to that. But when I got known in my community, oh, Shannon specializes in yoga for pelvic health, it just makes it so that I'm not competing with the average teacher down the street. And it takes it away completely. I can meet with another teacher in my area, find out what their specialty is, and refer people to them. And, also working. So I worked in a physiotherapy office. We call it in Canada. You call it physical
therapy, maybe PT.
We call it physiotherapy.
Yeah.
Working in that office, you quickly realize, if I want to be part of this healthcare team, there's me, there's the physios, there's the psychotherapist who does her own thing, and massage therapist. And so we all work together to help people, and we're not competing. We're part of a team, and we see who's a good fit for what. I don't know if that helps to answer that.
No, it really does. No, it helps. So it helped. Well, because, yoga is such a big word, which is why so many adjectives have been placed in front of it, like acro, goat, wine, alignment, flow, whatever. There's so many words that people have used to attempt to specify what it is you're going to get, when you go in and take a class with Shannon or with Kim or with whoever. And it's so funny. There's a book, The Anatomy of Hatha Yoga. Have you heard of that book? It's the very first one I read. It's over there on my bookcase. It's such an incredible book. It was the only one when I first started training that was really available on anatomy and yoga. And the first thing he talks about is Mula Bandha. The first thing he addresses is like pelvic floor stuff. And it strikes me that yoga for pelvic health and for the pelvic floor is really smart and really brilliant and connected to childbearing. I don't know if I don't think I have any. I have a lot of mothers on my in my platform, and I don't think any of them hasn't had some kind of pelvic floor issue. I mean, just like whether it's prolapse or it's like bladder incontinence, which of course connected, or it's tearing, or it's, any number of things. So let's talk a little bit about that you do and what training you did, and also what trainings you offer, because you have these teacher trainings in pelvic health, but obviously you must have done a lot of training to get to the place where you could offer the teacher training. So let's talk about that.
Well, before we do, I want to say, like, some people get very angry that, like, I call it yoga for pelvic health. And I'd
Oh,
say, oh, well, like, go have your pity party over there.
why? Wait,
I,
tell me.
okay, because
Oh, because
they're
yoga's for
upset. Like,
everything.
some people will say it's all yoga. Quit
Ugh.
calling it like this thing. And that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
But I know the work that I do. I am really good at helping people who have pelvic health issues use yoga as one of the things. And I learned, like, okay, so I took anatomy in college. I had 3 babies. I
Mm-hmm.
birthed 3 babies. I had all kinds of weird birth, complications and
Mm-hmm.
pregnancy stuff and pelvic girdle pain.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, wow, yoga really makes a difference. And it makes a difference for so many of the people I was working with, like in combination with working with pelvic health PTs. So
That's so cool.
yeah. And so then I realized, even if someone was going to a yoga class that was put together like mine is, or what I want to say is, like, not something that's focused on, like, here's how to be more flexible or like sweat so much. If we're working on down regulating the nervous system and connecting with your body and understanding and feeling what's going on,
Mm-hmm.
especially with your pelvis, if you've never done that, having that awareness, then you're doing tremendous benefits to your pelvic health and you might not even know it. And it wasn't until I started to learn so much about pelvic health that I was like, these two things just go together really well. And the same could be said if you got, like, just geeked right out on the feet and the soles of the feet and all the muscles and how the feet worked. That might be your thing. All I know is that I could talk all the time about topics like birth or pooping or all
Yeah.
the things that have to do with the pelvis. Like,
Yeah.
I nerd out about it. I'm really excited about it. And so for people who are telling me, like, this is just a marketing thing, or this is just this, or this is just that, if someone's telling you that, like, just know, uh, like, I'm here to help people. I know people who have had pelvic organ prolapse and were suicidal. I know people who, won't ever touch their own genitalia because they were raised that it's bad. Like, there are so many health issues that are going on that aren't talked about. And I want to change that. I feel like it's really empowering to know how your body works. I think that kids should be taught about pooping. I feel like, oh, here's just one thing. If someone's listening to this podcast and you just look at your stool every time you poop,
Yeah.
please, and check, is there any blood in it? And if there is, what does the blood look like? And pass that on to your doctor. That can save you from dying of rectal cancer, or like
Right.
you could know. And so that can be life-saving. And we're not taught that in health class. Like, we're
Mm-mm.
taught some, some other things that maybe aren't as useful as that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Totally.
So I get really passionate. And that's why I love talking about niching down, because you can tell when you hit on that topic and someone just, like, gets so excited about sharing.
Mm-hmm.
That's, like, even my kids know. Somebody was talking to one of my kids the other day about, like, I don't know, something to do with bowel movements. And my kids are all like teens to early 20s. And they were like, you should talk to my mom.
Yeah.
That makes me happy to think, like, they know I'm comfortable with it. They're okay telling their friends,
Yeah.
even at that age. And so the other part of your question, like, how did I train for this? Well,
Yeah.
it's amazing to me that this is skipped over in anatomy and yoga teacher trainings. Like it's
I
not
mean, yeah.
generally there. So I trained with pelvic health PTs, and that first started just by, you know, I was part of a prenatal yoga school. I co-founded it with my friend Kim, and we would hire a pelvic health PT to come in and talk to everyone about the pelvic health aspects of birthing. And then I started hiring PTs just on my own, like on Zoom. Can I have an hour of your time? I'll pay you. And I just have all these questions. And because I got hired by a physio office um, around the same time, I was like, okay, now I'm working with someone who has this, like physios would say to me, I need this person to relax and like learn how to breathe
Mm.
for whatever reason. Let's say they had endometriosis. And I was like, I need to learn more about endometriosis.
Yeah.
Like, I want to understand it. Not that I'm diagnosing it, not that I'm like treating it. I just want to
Right.
understand what the issues are so I can help them in the best way.
Right.
So I did that for a while. And that's how Pelvic Health Professionals, my membership that I run, was born. Because I'm like one person learning this information. I'd put it in a yoga teacher training. I'd put it all together for someone. And then boom, some new study would come out and I'd be like, shoot, that's not in the yoga teacher training.
Mm.
Plus I have these 10 other questions. So people would be taking my training. I just remember this one group. Oh my gosh, Laura Fowler Massey ran this group. They all took my training that was online. They took it together and then they did like a discussion group and they sent me like lists of amazing pelvic health questions.
Mm.
And I can't like sit with a question like that and not answer it. So I thought, what if we did this as a group, as a collective? We hire a pelvic health expert and we ask them all the questions and it's recorded and we do notes and we can continue to learn specifically about pelvic health because even that is a huge topic. Like
Yeah.
everything from
And
like,
getting bigger. Yeah. By the day.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like pediatric pelvic health, um, you know,
Yeah.
prostate cancer,
Yeah.
like anything to do with the pelvis. So
Yeah. Right.
that's I like the more I learn, the more I feel like I don't know. That's about yoga and pelvic health and
Both. Yeah.
maybe life.
I want to ask you this question that another mentor of mine for years and years, who is not a yoga teacher, but sort of adjacent to yoga, loves yoga. I taught him yoga for a long time, but now he's doing it on his own, basically. Anyway, and I've got a couple of kind of leadership yoga things I'm trying to do, and we were having this long conversation about it. Do you want to join me when I do this? Because I think it could be impactful. Blah, blah, blah. Just talking. And he said, it's whatever. He's all in. We were discussing it, and he said, it's at some point I would love for us to explore. And he was really talking about like as a society, how how yoga is necessarily different from these other interventions, from the kind of breathing that you can like read about in James Nestor's book, or I don't know, some other wellness practice, some kind of like,
Like
you
the
know,
exercises that your physio gives if you hurt
yeah,
your elbow
what
or whatever. Right.
totally any of those things. So what in your mind differentiates, like, it's not like exercises or learning, like healing in pelvic health, healing in pelvic, it's yoga for pelvic health. So what in your mind is the difference? How is yoga differentiated in that pelvic health
Good
space?
question. So I always look at the 8 limbs as my like this is my scope of practice and it could like go beyond. I'm not saying that it just has to be the 8 limbs, but I like to introduce people to lots of aspects of yoga now, not just asana or just pranayama. Those are definitely people are ready for those, but that would be how I would outline it. And the real like how many physio appointments do you go to and they're like, okay, we're going to talk about ahimsa, like non-harming, like those
Mm,
practices could take up so much time to learn those. And I'm still like, I still look at the 8 limbs, or like the koshas is another great example where sometimes it feels to me like it's pretty hard to like learn those and use them in your practice. You know what I mean? Like the theory of that. And so that's what I think a good yoga teacher does, is brings that into. And I've been to Catherine Bruni Young is someone who does like mindful strength. So she went through for a yoga teacher. She really does specialize in strengthening. And I think she does it in a way where it's the mindfulness piece that makes it different than like going to the gym and working
mhm,
out.
mhm.
That's a good question. I would love to flip it around and say, like, what are your thoughts on it? What do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've thought about this a lot, and I think there are a couple of like geniuses in modern yoga, which, as you and I have also discussed, I personally think has a brand problem. I think I agree with you completely that to say like it's all just yoga and it's all just whatever is a little bit of it's a little bit of like obtuse observation of what is. It's not being really accountable to the field of reality of what people's actual human experience is and how the practice of the reducing or the ceasing of the fluctuations of the modifications of the mind can be. I mean, that's such a profound practice. I was just taking this workshop, Abhijata Iyengar, who's the sort of inheritress of the Iyengar situation. She's a millennial. She's in her late 30s, and she is in her 21st year of yoga practice because she began full-time practicing yoga outside of her studies in school, which she did all in like biomechanics and anatomy and whatever with her grandfather with BKS. And so it's fascinating to see what this woman has to say about this whole body of work that her grandfather sort of told her, I want you to take it on, and she was saying, if you read the first or the second, sutra, it's necessarily about practice because you're talking about the process of, ceasing, the modifications of the mind. And so I start with that as the sort of genius of modern yoga, because first of all, in a yoga class, which itself, as we know, is sort of a modern concept, it's not something that was happening even 100, 200 years ago. There was more like the sort of guru shishya relationship. It was a one-on-one thing. It was like passing on the knowledge in this kind of oral tradition sort of a way. Yes, there were other stuff. There's other stuff that's being read. We can look at the Hatha Yoga Pradipika and say that, oh, that's like where the first Baddha Konasana was like illustrated, whatever. But the modern yoga class has at the end of it, different from any other class that I know of, unless, that this practice has also been sort of appropriated, is Shavasana. Like in what circumstance do you lie there and perform an act which is necessarily designed to help you be aware, as you were saying early in our call, of yourself, noticing your body in a situation where you're not sleeping, you're not moving, you're resting, but you're aware of resting. And just, I used to say when I would teach that, you're creating new memories here. You're letting go of the old and just allowing these like, new stuff to come in. So that's like one thing that I think really differentiates it. The second two things, so I think it's three, is yes, the concentration, the focus, or the elevation, the amplification of any cycle of breath, any awareness or noticing of the breath. We definitely notice breath and all kinds of other modalities, like when you run, when you anything, we do notice that. But and this is the genius, I think, of modern flow. And I don't think that flow yoga, actually vinyasa flow, has a brand. I think the rest of yoga has a bit of a problem, but I think flow yoga doesn't really have that much of a problem because it's very much about the flow of the breath with the flow of the body. And that's amazing. That is amazing to just like link the two together in this to make a yoga and to make it, to unify those two is like brilliant. And then finally, you can't help but like bump into your mind or bump into your thoughts, exactly as you were also describing in your first yoga class. If you are doing those previous two things, like linking movements of the body with movements of the breath, then you start to notice movements of the mind. And so to me, it is a slightly complicated answer. I did not just give you a soundbite answer, so I wish I could, but I think that answer is stringing these things together that internally we know are true. Like we know interoceptively that when we change the breath, we change the mind. We know interoceptively that when we elongate the body and breathe, that feels so good. We know when we push ourselves to become stronger and breathe through some contractive exercise, that also feels good, but in a different sort of a way. And you just get to watch the mind kind of change and shift. So I just think that yoga is like, I think this is one of the reasons why it's been absorbed by women in modern. And in fact, I talked to Amanda Kingsmith about this a lot when I was on her podcast. I just think one of the most important parts of modern yoga is that women are doing it. And that frankly, in our minds, for the most part, I don't mean to exclude anybody or say anything, sort of exclusive about, but I just think on average, the sort of female identifying or female, inherent mind can multitask, can see all these things happening at once and really hold space for those different truths. My mind is X, my body is Y, my breath is Z. And that's cool. So anyway, that wasn't too long an answer.
It wasn't too long of an answer. It's
Supposed to be
really
asking
good.
you.
I like thinking that Shavasana or Shavasana, however you call it,
Yeah.
that's part of it. And also that like breath and movement together. And you also said a word, awareness, which was a big part of like what that noticing, that being present with yourself. Awareness is a really good word that kind of summarizes yoga.
It's like a relaxed awareness, don't you think? It's like not hyper vigilant awareness. And I think that's what PTSD, work, what I think the like sort of trauma informed work in yoga is so amazing right now. I am in awe of looking at all of the things that are happening on my feed and things that I see on your podcast, for example, people talking about this like a lot, about how we can begin by dropping into the body, keeping our eyes open, just letting the breath come as it is, to observe the difference between hypervigilant awareness and relaxed awareness, and awareness where you were saying earlier that you said like you maybe grew up like feeling like chaos was the norm or something. I had a similar, childhood experience, and I've never, well, rarely, almost like 99% of the time, I never feel chaos in my body. I get in there and I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah. Like when you have a moment to really sink in and you're like, all right, it's time.
there's no
Do you
chaos
think
here.
that's
It's all
from
good.
going to yoga and being trained, like sort of training the body and the mind? This is my spot where we're going to
Maybe.
sink in and do it.
Maybe it is. To be honest with you, the only time that I did not feel that way, that's why I went for the 99. I was like, oh no, because as I was preparing after 16 years of teaching to become a certified Iyengar yoga teacher, I met somebody like after we got certified, she was like, that's like certifiable. Let me tell you, it is not certified, certifiable. Because you said you feel so crazy by the end. There's so much stress and so much pressure. And for me, it was so much ego because I was like, what if I fail after 16 years of teaching? What if they don't accept me? What if they tell me I'm not good enough? And it made me sick. I had so many anxiety attacks. Like before I went in to get certified, my daughter was like, years ago, she was like, Mom, what's irony? And I was like, let me tell you what irony is. Irony is like becoming really unhealthy while trying to become certified as a yoga teacher. That is irony, So anyway, I guess, yeah, that I've trained myself kind of Pavlovian style over the years. Yeah. To know that it's not even about the mat anymore. It is, the mat helps, the actual physical mat, like, behind me, but more like the moment. It's more about the moment of entry than it is the mat.
Yeah. Yeah. Like those, I think that's a really healthy way to build that ritual or that habit is, and that, and bring that awareness in for sure. And I've been to lots of yoga classes where, like, not being that mindful. Like it was a space where also this reminds me of one time I was in yoga teacher training. We'd been there for some months. We were going to do meditation. And I was like, it's going to be 30 minutes. I know it is because Kundalini and my teacher was like, we'll just enter into the weekend with like 30-minute meditation.
Mm.
And I thought, I'm going to think through this other thing because I need to. And that'll be a great spot to do it. And I couldn't. I could not. Like my brain and my body were like, nope, we're right here in this moment. Good luck. Like we're not doing this other distracting thing. And I was like, wow. That was actually what I needed. Like I didn't intuitively know that, or I forgot it somewhere along the way, that like you can, I don't want to say even be a much more productive human, but it's true. Like I have a tendency to like just become this squirrel around the things that I want to get done, and that like work or in my house or in my garden, wherever. If I did a bit of yoga, I could actually see what's top priority here, what's necessary. How could I do this mindfully? Like,
It's so true, because back to that, like, relaxed awareness, and that's the thing that's so, and maybe this is an even better, shorter answer for how yoga is distinguished, especially in the work that you do with these physios. And I actually want to get back to the health professionals, and just maybe to end it. But I was thinking that the sort of wonderful thing about experience is an energy follows awareness. So if you are becoming aware of having this kind of energy, this kind of breath, this kind of mind state, then you're going to be aware of having it more in the next experience you have, whether it's quote on the mat or not. And that's the key. Oh my God. It's the thing I've been teaching people oh God, I feel like I've been teaching this, a lot, especially outside of the yoga studio, like in any situation where it's work or business or, some group of people that have hired me for whatever. I always feel like I need to just tell them, like, what you're doing now is like you're investing in yourself, investing in your mind, investing in the processes that occur inside of you when you are confronted with stress or different thought or distraction or anything else. Like begets like. So the more of this you do, it's a sweet spot. You can't go to the cave. I mean, I can't, go to the cave and just like do it all day, every day. I see some child-free people on Instagram sometimes, like, especially like after this conference that the Iyengars had, and they're like practicing so much because they learned so much, and they're loving it and learning it. And I'm like, I'm like, meanwhile, pecking my way through the recording of the thing, like, got 30 minutes, I can do this. And I've taken like a 2-hour workshop, I swear to God, over a 10-day period. 2 hours,
yeah.
10 days. It's the most, it's all I've been able to do. So,
Yeah. It was really part of my first yoga teacher training, this whole idea of like householder yoga.
oh
So you
gosh.
can't go off and meditate in a mountain.
Yeah.
And for me, I've realized over the years that I am much stronger with a regular daily practice, even if it's shorter,
Yeah.
than I am with like once a week, an hour.
I know.
And
Totally.
and this doesn't always happen. I also am just the type of person who will fall away from doing a disciplined daily practice.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to not be hard on myself and be like, all right, here we go. Day one, yet again.
Yeah,
Like
totally.
showing up for myself. Yeah.
Totally. That feels like the best place to start, because it's like back to beginner's mind and back to the humility of us all just doing this together in a connected way, which is again back to how cool I think what you're doing is. Tell me before we end, I'm just so interested about how the pelvic health professionals, like what percentage are yoga teachers and what does the membership look like? Is it centered on bringing these other professionals in who then lecture and then you sort of pass out the notes? Is that the main thrust of it? Or tell me a little bit more about that before we stop.
So it is okay. So both hats of mine, like the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast is really fueled by questions from yoga teachers. That's what like keeps me going. That's what I think makes it really relevant for yoga teachers. And same with pelvic health professionals. So we, at first it was really focused on the guest speakers, mainly some Q&A calls, and then we see what members are asking. And out of that came this really cool series. So I mean, it's kind of weird how people will ask me a question, ask it again, like ask it in a different way. And I
Yeah.
can't really see what the answer is for a while. And I feel like we just hit on this light bulb in that group. So one of the questions was, can you demo some of these poses and like break them down with regards to pelvic health? So I attempted that. And then I was like, this is so weird because every body that you work with is so individual on different days. Like, how would you break this down and say, this is what's happening in your body in this pose? It just
Mm-hmm.
seemed like a lot. But I definitely have some favorite poses. So I put together this 6-week yoga for pelvic health series where people are just practicing. It's not all about the theory. You're just like in your body doing the practice, and it's focused on pelvic health. And then also, yoga teachers can learn, oh, this is how I would put a class together. This is the series. I can change it however I want. Like,
Hmm.
this is the outline. And then there's some theory. We did like a workshop of 3 hours of theory before that. That I love. So then we did one with a guest teacher. Shelley Prosco came in and talked about balance and how that's relative to
Hmm.
pelvic health and the core, and
Hmm.
did some theory. There's some science behind it as well, a really cool scientific study, and then put this series together of yoga where people are practicing. And we're going to keep doing that. We have someone who signed up to do like yoga for endometriosis. We have some other people who want to learn more about prenatal yoga with regards to pelvic health. So I feel like we're also adding to it. And the percentage of yoga teachers is really high. I want to say it's probably 75% yoga
Hmm.
teachers
Hmm.
because of the podcast. Like, I mostly talk to yoga
Yeah.
teachers.
Yeah. I
I
know. Yeah.
really wanted it to be like to start to even out and be more PTs and gynecologists and doctors and nurses. But I realized that's just not who I talk to all the time. And
Yeah.
that's okay too. So
Yeah.
we get different modalities in through our guest speakers. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and
That's
you asked me like how does it work, like the membership wise?
yeah. Yeah.
Right now, as you and I are recording, it's $39 a month and people can sign up. Like, they could sign up for a month, check it out, dive in, really learn, like take in so much in that month and then leave, which
Hmm.
is really reasonable. Like I say, it's like Netflix for pelvic health, but
That's awesome. I love that. I love that co-branding. You keep doing
yeah.
that. That is so, I think what you're doing is great. And I love the podcast and I love this professional work you're doing and the niching and all of it. So, Shannon, I really appreciate your time and coming in. Is there any last thing you want to say, advice to yoga teachers or anything at all before we stop?
Um, I think the only thing that I'm learning right now is sometimes you may feel like you want to like quit being an entrepreneur or running your own business or quit being a yoga teacher for many reasons. Or in my case, it was like I put a pause on doing like coaching or consultation calls with yoga teachers because you start to look around and you get a little I was starting to look around and getting a little disheartened seeing what was going on in the coaching world of things and the business side of things.
Hmm.
Does it really bumped up against a lot of my like values and yoga philosophy?
Hmm.
And I think the same thing happens for yoga teachers. I've heard yoga teachers saying, I'm quitting because I'm white and I feel like this is cultural appropriation. I want to say, like, when you feel like that, really look at what you can do to help people before you quit. Like maybe there's something else that's really calling to you and you want to quit, and that's the reason that's really like is the biggest reason. Go for it. Do your own thing, but also I see so many yoga teachers with the ability to make a huge impact in the world, and for some reason they don't feel confident enough to put it out there. They shy away from marketing. They feel bad about making money, and of the, like you and I both said, of everything else in the world, we don't know anything where we can find that level of like being connected to ourselves and really feeling like ourselves, or maybe it's, healing or whatever, just that level of greatness that we feel in our own human bodies. That means that like we need to be there showing up for people, and they need to know about our classes and our offerings. So that's kind of my one last thing is, yeah, we all have tough days, and I've wanted to quit as a yoga teacher, podcaster, entrepreneur, all the things, and just like focus on how you help people.
That is an even better way to start, and places to stop, rather. Start. Can we start that the next time?
Yeah.
Shannon, that was great. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you so much for all of your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me here. It's so great to connect with you.
Likewise.